More from Timothy about the arrival of Titus in Corinth. At the shop that evening, Paul would not be comforted. He paced up and down the small room, spitting fury, directing a spew of words which I strove to transcribe on fresh papyrus. But it seemed that the man had lost more blood than he would admit. At odd moments, he would slump down, pale and fainting, and suddenly still. No matter. As soon as his senses returned, he rose up again, pacing, raging. Kunotharsis, hateful, deceitful, foes of the freedom of Christ. Timothy, they gave me the right hand of fellowship. Titus remembers, don't you, Titus? No one required you to be circumcised. Nothing new added to me, nothing. But now they want to destroy the gospel of Christ. Young Titus had brought us the copy of a certain letter by a man named Judas Barsabbas, a letter in which Barsabbas was thanking God that 14 plus 20 men were likely to be circumcised by Passover. The letter had been sent to Antioch, but its place of origin was Pessinus in Galatia, the same place where Paul had fallen ill 2.5 years ago, the town where Paul and Silvanus and I had preached and established a baby church. Circumcised, Paul howled. Circumcised. The dogs are pursuing us, stealing God's children as if they were sheep, cutting them bloody, casting them under the law, casting them straight to hell. Circumcised. Oh, let them lay the blade of the knife on their own most tender parts and slip. I wish they'd castrate themselves. The sea would be shut to shipping in less than a month. Then snow would close the mountain passes. Time for traveling was limited. Paul wanted to leave for Jerusalem in 5 days. Jerusalem first, then Antioch, and then, when the Cilician gates were open for travel, to Galatia before the Passover. Titus and I agreed. We said we'd be ready tomorrow. Aquila and Prisca had been subdued that whole evening, part of which they'd spent alone in the loft above the shop. I thought Paul's wrath was troubling them, or else that day itself, the fights and triumphs, had bewildered them. But I was wrong. The cause of their quietness was closer to loss. In the darkness, in the approaching cold, they descended the ladder and softly disclosed their hearts to us. They said, Paul, please take us with you. They knew how to live in tents, they said. They'd already moved once. They knew how, leaving everything behind, and were prepared to move as often as necessary for the sake of the gospel of their Lord Jesus Christ. Paul stopped pacing. His agitation vanished. He picked up the oil lamp and went to Prisca, where she had remained, in the back by the ladder. He lifted the lamp beside their two faces, rimming their cheeks with a bashful light, his a hawk's glare, hers uncertain. Distinctly, soundlessly, he whispered, Priscilla. He called her Priscilla. I'd never heard the name before. Prisca bent her head and looked at the floor between them. Her dark eyes sank into shadow. Her hair was pulled tightly back to the nape of her neck, so that she presented Paul with a straight white part from brow to crown. Almost imperceptibly, she nodded, and Paul said yes. Then he put the lamp down and pitched himself again into his restless pacing. He wondered aloud, could Aquila sell the shop in less than 10 days? Paul would wait 10, he said, but no more. It would kill him to wait longer. Yes, Aquila could sell the shop in less than 10 days. Good, good. And what about this? Paul asked. What if the two of them traveled just halfway with us to Ephesus, stopping there while we went on? Paul said that Corinth should be a model for their next metropolis. That Prisca and Aquila find living quarters and set up another workshop and win friends in Ephesus just as they had in Corinth. And so prepare for Paul's arrival there at a later date. Because he was coming back, he said, with vigor. Oh yes, he was returning to continue his mission among Gentiles, just as soon as he took care of business in the East. No, he said, this time we wouldn't travel on foot. We would ship eastward. The winds will be with us, sudden and strong, he said, and God must be with us too. There were two advantages to our waiting the full 10 days. First, Paul had time to regain his strength, though when he went forth toward Cenchreae walking, the bow-legged man did not scramble ahead of the pack, as once he would have done. He had aged. Paul had. His body was tired, and his back tormented him more than anyone knew. He walked in a sort of drop-shouldered pain. And second, Paul had time to talk with Sosthenes. Two men of intensities. They debated in the marketplace, argued in the streets, quarreled beside the synagogue, and shouted so loudly in little Judea, I thought they'd pick up bricks to knock each other down. And in the end, Sosthenes put money in his belt and came with us.